Welcome to the Hardwood Time Capsule podcast. This episode features an absolute superstar of world basketball, a world champion with 4 Olympic medals, 2 WNBL titles and a French League title. She is simply the greatest guard Australia has ever produced. Ladies and gentlemen, Kristi Harrower. Kristi Harrower,
hey,
welcome to the podcast.
How you going?
I'm good, thanks. More importantly, how are you going?
I'm okay.
You're all right? For those that
Yeah.
don't know, Kristi's, about 48 hours ago, had a couple of arthroscopes.
Yeah, it was 2 arthroscopes, one on a bad knee that I had an ACL about 22 years ago. And just one that I tore a bit of my good knee that I've never had any problems with for like 48 years. Yeah, had cartilage torn on it. So yeah. Do you want my AirPods in? What is it?
No, you're good. I got you loud and clear.
Okay.
I do have to ask though, if you're having surgery, are we getting a LJ style comeback? Is that on the cards or what?
Not at all.
No, thanks for coming on the podcast. Our first female on the podcast and probably our most decorated guest, to be honest. So really looking forward to having a chat. Wanted to get you on here for a couple of reasons. One is obviously to talk about your own career and women's basketball, but also definitely my favorite player growing up and a whole lot of others, I think. I take it right back to, for those that remember that lived in Melbourne at the time, I was a Melbourne Tigers member, and before the game, the women would play. And this was in like the late 90s. So we're talking black lycra uniforms and stuff like that. But yeah, and I was, I think, sort of 9 or 10 at the time. And I just remember we were fascinated. We'd always get there early to watch and really love that. So we'll take you back to those days. We'll have a really big look through a whole lot of things over a pretty decorated career. And then obviously, as most Hoops fans will have seen you on the TV in the FIBA Asia Cup recently, sort of where we're at now. But on that note, outside of obviously us seeing you doing some assistant coaching and that with the Boomers, is there other stuff that's filling up your time at the moment? Sort of where are you at these days?
No, I did have a business for about 8 years in Bendigo and I live in Melbourne, so I drive up every weekend and I had a manager look after it. So, but sold it last year. But other than that, just my 2 boys that are 6 and 8 that take up all my time. So it's pretty full on.
Yeah, are they into basketball yet?
They do. We live around the Keilor area, so in Melbourne. So they do mini thunder up at Keilor. My 8-year-old's decided not to. He doesn't want to do it anymore. But my 6-year-old thinks he wants to be a basketballer. But not sure he's going to have the height for a boy. So but he's definitely got my drive and my determination and probably my temper as well. So that's probably a good thing. But he loves it. He's pretty natural at any sport. Yeah.
No, well, that's good. I'm sure Keilor Thunder are licking their lips and hoping he sticks with it, and then I'll get you in the coaching ranks, I'm sure. In terms of your resume, as we do with every guest we have on here, we obviously go through their playing resume because we have listeners of different age groups, some that grew up, in the 70s, 80s, and then we've obviously got ones that are, playing right now, in their juniors, in their teens and those sort of things. So I thought what we do is play a little bit of a game with it, okay? Because there is a pretty extensive career. And so what we'll do is I'm going to list off in order the teams that you played in, and we're going to see if you can name the coach at the time and one of the teammates. Okay, so you can pick any teammate. The only rule is you can't pick the same teammate. So for all your 4 Olympic games, I nearly cut you short there. We can't go LJ the whole time or something like that. All right, we'll see how we go. So 1991, the Melbourne Tigers. Who was your coach there and a teammate?
91 would have been Ray Tomlinson, and Joe Metcalf would have been a teammate.
Okay, good start. Then we move on to the AIS for 2 years up in Canberra.
Bill Brown was our coach for both years.
Right.
Carla Boyd would have been a teammate, and Joe Hill would have been a teammate.
Okay. Yep. Some Adelaide Lightning players there, and then that moves us on to the Adelaide Lightning in 1994.
Yep. Jan Sterling was the coach, and Rachel Spawn was a teammate.
Oh, you have no worries at all. And then we go, this one's where you're going to have to get a bit creative because you're going to have to name multiple players. 1995 to 2000, if you can give us 5 players and obviously the coach or coaches during that period of time with the Tigers.
Oh God, this one will be. I know the coach. That's easy. That's Ray Tomlinson all the way
Yeah.
through. So 95 would have been coming back to Melbourne. Probably Michelle Chandler would have been a teammate. 96 would have been Narelle McConnell. Now Narelle Fletcher. Now it starts to get harder. 98. Oh God. Sam Tomlinson.
Yep.
99. I reckon 99 is 99 my last year because I went overseas in 2000.
To Germany, yeah.
So
Or Phoenix, sorry.
Maybe a teammate. Anthea Toner might have been a teammate at the time.
Okay, we'll give you those ones. It is hard, especially if you're trying to do them in year by year.
I know.
And then we look at Phoenix, the Phoenix Mercury, first taste of the WNBA in the late 90s. Coach and player there.
So Cheryl Miller was our coach and Michelle Timms was a player.
Yeah, everyone will know Michelle Timms.
Yep.
Fantastic player in her own right. And then Germany. I didn't know too much about your time over there with, I apologize if I mispronounce it. Is it Wuppertal?
It's Wuppertal.
That's all right. There we go.
Yep. So actually, I got recruited to that team because Sandy Brondello was in that team and her husband, Olaf, was the coach. So that was the connection with Germany and Wuppertal.
There you go. Excellent. And it's interesting. There was a funny little clip that came out of those two being head coach and assistant coach, and one of the players completely forgot they were even married because they're such professionals with their. You saw that clip, did you?
Yeah.
Yeah, quite ironic. And the Minnesota Lynx we'll move on to next.
So Brian Agler was my coach and Katie Smith would have been a player. So she was a big time USA player.
Yeah. And I've already embarrassed myself once, so I won't embarrass myself again. I'll get you to pronounce the name of your French team.
So the first one that I played with for 3 years was Aix-en-Provence.
Yep.
So I think we had 2 different coaches there. I won't go with the surname because I don't know the surname, but the first coach was Abdul.
Yeah.
And first year I would have had as a player, she's actually now the president of Lyon, the women's team in Lyon that Tony Parker owns.
Yeah.
Mary Sophie Obermar is who I play with that first year. And then second year would have been Nat Lesdemar. And third year, because I was there 3 years, God, I'm trying to think who would have been there at the time. Izzy Costa Marcus, that was a big time Brazilian player.
Right. Okay. There we go. There's some names. If you don't know the names, there's a chance to do some Googling on those and look them up in the World Game. We move on from there. We you go back to Minnesota for a year in 2005. Same coach or different coach at that time?
I think it was a different coach at that time. So I spent about 3 or 4 seasons with Minnesota, but always missed it when it was Olympic year because I stayed home.
Yeah.
Susie McConnell-Serio would have been our coach at that time. So I think she was a great, I think she just missed out on the WNBA or maybe played a couple of seasons when the WNBA started. So she was a little bit older and then went to coaching. So, and I think that year we might have actually traded Katie Smith away. So trying to think of a player that year. Tamika Williams, a UConn player.
Okay. Yep. Very successful program, the UConn program.
Yep.
For a lot of years. So anytime you can get a teammate from there, you're doing well. I'll get you to pronounce the next one, 2005 to 2007. Can you remember that one?
Valenciennes in France. That's the top of France, about 10 minutes from the Belgian border. So I played there for 2 seasons. Probably the best 2 years I probably played in Europe, to be honest with you. I actually really enjoyed the coach and probably the fittest I was when I played in Europe and played a lot of EuroLeague, Euro Cup those years. So Laurent Bouffard was our coach. And first year we had Sandrine Ledrine, a top French player.
Right.
And then second year, or both years, we had her, but I can't name both. But Sandrine Gruder, that still plays with the French girls at the moment. So big time French player.
Yeah, when you say you enjoyed the coach there, I often ask players when they make that statement, um, why is that? Is it because you had more freedom? Is it because it was just your style of play?
A bit of both, and I think it was a coach that a lot of people that have been to Europe, or a lot of people that don't know, when you go to Europe, a lot of coaches will train you twice a day, every day.
Right.
You're going to get one day off a week, and it's pretty full on. I mean, you get paid as pros. So, and
Mhm.
I think with this coach, he was quite smart because of us playing EuroLeague and the French league, that he was very smart at understanding the recovery and understanding what needed to be done on court and how much and things like that. So it was a coach that we only trained once a day.
Mhm.
And if we did do twice a day, it would be, for example, weights. It wouldn't be twice on the court. And I think maybe I was just fresh a lot. I didn't wear my body down over the 8 months that we're there for. And he was a coach that just let us play. We got out and ran a lot at training, pretty fit. We had a track outside our basketball court. So if we didn't do a weights on a Monday, it would be a running session on the track, and then you'd do a lighter session that night. And I don't know, it was just very well balanced with what he did. And a coach that just was it was funny because I didn't understand a lot of the French. I knew basketball French, but I couldn't speak it. And some players thought he was quite negative, but because you don't understand a lot of the French, you don't hear the negativity.
Yeah.
And but I think he respected me, and he respected a lot of the Aussies that had been through that program, because we work our butts off when we play and when we train. And I think you get respect that way. And I think he respected me and just let me play the way that I knew that I could play.
Yeah, no, fair enough, and appreciate the honesty with that. In terms of training twice a day and those sort of things, because yeah, you do hear it from other players that it's pretty hardcore in terms of that style over there. What's the actual like schedule like when it comes to European basketball? Is it more like here, like you play once, maybe a double header on a weekend, or is it more like the WNBA?
Yeah, not at all, not even close to the WNBA either. So what they
Right.
usually do is, for example, like if you're in a Euro League or a Euro Cup, and then
Hmm.
you play in your, say, your local league, which is wherever you are, the French league, the Spanish league, Italian league. So 5 years I was in France, and so whenever we played Euro League, it was like a Wednesday night game or a Thursday night game. And then when you played the French league, you would play it on a Saturday night. So you'd
Right.
only play one. That's why the French league is one of the longest leagues over there. You would only play one French game a week, and that would be your Saturday night. But your Euro League or Euro Cup could be a Wednesday or Thursday. So, and of course, over there's a lot of traveling, even though Europe is so close. For some reason, it would take 12 hours to get to somewhere by, say, like if I was in Valenciennes, so it's an hour and a half on the bus to Paris, then you would fly wherever you had to fly, say 2 hours, 3 hours. Then it might be like, if, say, for example, if you go to Sopron, I think it is, then you got to travel 3 hours to get to Sopron when you get off the plane. So ends up being a long day that way, even though, like I said, Europe is so close to everything. But I think it's yeah, so that's the way the leagues work over there. So you don't play double headers. You only play, I mean, other leagues could be different. I know I did the same when I played in Russia. That was the same, but because the Euro League and the Euro Cup take up so much of that weekly schedule with the travel. Like, because if you play away on a Wednesday, you travel on Tuesday, you don't get back till Thursday night. So it's 3 days there for Euro League.
Yeah, right. That's a massive insight. Thank you very much for that. Because unless you've actually been in your shoes and played over there, most of us won't really know what goes on behind the scenes there. So you can see why you enjoyed that coach now and not having to back up from 12 hours of travel and
Yeah, exactly.
do double sessions. I think that moves us on to Russia next. UMMC, I'll get you to finish that one.
Yeah, so it's UMMC, and it's Ekaterinburg. So it was on
Right.
the um Siberia border. It was like -30 every day.
Wow.
It was crazy, but it was I enjoyed it, I think, because there was a lot of imports there. It was one of the richest, well, it was the richest club in Europe for a long time. We had our own plane, we had our own drivers, we had our own translators. Didn't have to do much at all. So it's and it's only now that it's not one of the richest clubs just because the wars now happened in Europe and Turkey's
Yes.
taken over. So it had been like I was there in 2007, I think it was, and it was still the richest club till the war happened. So and our coach at the time was actually my French coach. So my French coach that I had in Valenciennes, the one that I really enjoyed, Laurent Bouffard, he ended up getting the job in Russia and took me and Sandrine Gruder with him. So I did have a 2-year deal, but I only ended up playing 1 year because they actually sacked me the second year and brought in Cappy Pondexter, which is a big-time USA player. So disappointing, but I'd heard rumors during the off-season that they were thinking about not bringing me back, and they wanted to trade me. And what they want to do is, when you do that in Europe, is that they might trade me to another club in Europe and they only pay half of it, and then the other club pays half of my wage. And I was 33 at the time, and I thought to myself, no, Buggier, you've known about this all along. You've cut me 2 weeks before the start of the season, which was after the 2008 Olympics.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, stuff yous, I'm going to stay at home and you can pay me to stay at home. So I did that and played for Bendigo for nothing because the Russians were paying me. And end up staying. I tried to get the bonuses as well, but that didn't happen. So the bonuses,
was that your first time in your career being on that end of it?
Yeah, really was. And it's funny, my husband sits here and goes, oh, we should go back to Europe because the money was better. But then again, I look at it and I take a positive out of it, that I'm not sure if I would have got to my 4th Olympics if I stayed in Europe. So maybe my body would have broken down. I did have really bad Achilles at the end of my career. So, so that was the first time being on the end of, being sacked, I suppose, or cut from a club in Europe. But I mean, I look at it and I probably didn't play the same way that I would usually play like I did in France. I think sometimes it was like when I played in the WNBA, when I had superstars around me, I felt like I took a step back and not played the same way. So it was probably my fault in a way of not still being aggressive and playing the normal way that I used to play.
Yeah, but it sounds like you moved on with it pretty quickly. Obviously, it can be a bit of a shock if it's not something you're used to, and was definitely to Bendigo's advantage. I mean, getting a player of your caliber for off the books, or not for nothing, essentially,
exactly.
is something every club would dream of. Next, we come to the Bendigo Spirit. Obviously, a long span there, and in between there is the LA Sparks. So we might go to the Sparks first because Bendigo, I'm pretty sure you know the coach there. So we'll go with the LA Sparks first.
I actually stopped playing in the WNBA in 2000 and I reckon 2005 was my last season because I didn't go back in 2006 with the World Championships in Brazil. And I was pretty exhausted after my European stint because I'd been in Europe for a long time. So I decided not to go back, and then I took a few years off. And then in 2009, I thought, I'll go back to the WNBA, give it one more shot. And I went back to LA Sparks, and Michael Cooper was our coach, and pretty tough coach, actually. He, I think he coached us a lot like he was coached back in his NBA career. Even the girls would say that. We had a bit of an older team. We had Lisa Leslie, Tina Thompson, Delisha Milton, like a lot of players that have played for USA basketball. And so whenever we'd travel, even if we'd play back-to-backs, he would still make us train. And the girls would say, well, this is what they used to do back in their day. They'd get off a flight at, 5 or 6 in the morning, go straight to the gym and train. And I think times have changed a lot since then. And I think some of us, the older ones, sort of struggled with it a little bit. But I think that season, though, I came back to Australia fit as anything. I think, there was a little point guard that played in that team. Her name was Shannon Bobbitt, and she was quick as anything, and I had to guard her every day at training. And so when I came back to Australia, I was pretty fit and close to MVP, I think I was that year, I think in the WNBL. But a really enjoyable season, a real eye-opener for me, actually.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting that you mentioned a couple of times, both in Europe and America, about the old school philosophy is train harder, train more, and get better. And these days, with coaching staff of 7, 8 people, including physios and sports scientists and all that sort of stuff. Very different to to the old school. So it's interesting comparing those two. And then obviously, a really successful stint going back to your hometown, winning their first championship with them, winning a couple of champs, but the first one was the first for Bendigo, and obviously playing under your father. Everyone remembers, all those iconic games and those sort of things. But just reel off, just for the listeners, a few of the players that you did play with during your time at Bendigo, because it might bring back some memories.
Yeah, amazing group in Bendigo. I think one thing I'll give Dad credit for was that he always made sure he tried to recruit good people. That was the biggest thing first. And we had a core group that went together for about 6 years, maybe 7 years, which was huge. And Kelly Wilson's still playing today. She was one of them. Gabe Richards, Kelsey Griffin that still plays. Chelsea Aubry, a Canadian player that we had for 6 years. One of the nicest people you'd ever meet, never come into the gym without always on a smile on her face, never in a shit or anything like that, like never moody, just a great person to have around our club and just played her role perfectly. And I think that's what made us so, I think out of the 8 years that Dad coached in Bendigo, I think it was only 1 year that he missed the final. So as in like semi or grand final. So it was a pretty successful program. And, a really, those 2 years that we won the championship and went on to the third year and lost to Townsville up there, it was pretty special, I think. It was a really good group to be around.
Yeah, it seemed that way. And, the romantic side of it being a country town and, where you're from and bringing it home. And if it was America, they'd probably make a movie about it, but it's Australia, so they don't, so that's fantastic. Now we'll go on to your international career. Done very well and gave us all an education then on different places around the world and coaching philosophies and training schedules and playing schedules and all that sort of stuff. So really appreciate that. Thanks for being so open. Now we go to the Olympics, and obviously we've got the Sydney Olympics, where we get a silver. Coach and a player from that team, and we can't name Michelle Timms.
Yeah. Tom Ma was our coach, and Lauren Jackson was a part of that team. That was her first Olympics with mine.
Yeah. Fantastic. And we move on then to Athens, was 2004.
Yep. So Jan Sterling was our coach, and Penny Taylor was in that squad, in that team. Yeah,
great player, Penny Taylor. We all remember her very well. In between that and going on to the next Olympics was the greatest moment in Australian basketball, really. The only time Australia has won a gold medal at a major championship. So you're one of only 12 people in, what are we up to now, 25 million people in Australia. So pretty huge honor. That's 2006 in Brazil. We'll go with coach and player, but if you can sort of fill us in on just how that experience was.
Yeah, that was amazing, that experience. So once again, Jan Sterling was the coach. And I'll name Tully Bevilacqua in that one. That was her first time she ever made an Australian team, and I think she was in her 30s. And everybody knows Tully Bevilacqua. She was a defensive specialist. Like, she was amazing. But that group, I don't know, we had a day preparation together because right. Lauren had made it to the WNBA finals. I think they went all the way, but I think they ended up losing in the end in the WNBA finals. So a few of us had been together for about 10 days, and then we did a tour around America and then flew into Brazil, if I can remember correctly. And she met up with us a day before we had to start. And so our first game was actually against Lithuania, and we didn't end up playing that first game because we ended up just doing a green and gold scrimmage on the main court in front of our family and some fans, because they'd gone through somewhere where they had yellow fever and they hadn't had the injections or something. Right. So we actually didn't, because back in those days at the World Cup, you'd play 3 games, day off, 3 games, day off, and then you would go 2 games, day off, and then medal game. So so it was 9 games that used to play back in those days. And it was pretty much like 9 games in 12 days or something that we used to play. So we didn't end up playing that first game against Lithuania because of that reason. And then it was a great tour, but it was a bit of a hard tour for me. Like when I say hard tour, I got food poisoning for one of the games, so I couldn't play. Thank God we only played Argentina in that game. So I was on a drip in my room because I was sick as anything. So my doctor put me on a drip. So I didn't play that game. And then stupid me in the semi-final game against Brazil. It was so we're playing Brazil in the semi-final in Brazil, and their crowds are amazing.
Yeah.
And like even on a foul shot, they're like, yeah, on a foul shot, like they celebrate so hard. And the game was like, I think we were down going into the fourth quarter. I can't remember what it was, but I don't know. I think with that group that I went through, we had so much belief within us. We didn't even have to talk about it. It was the belief or the toughness or the relentless that we had to know that we would wear teams down over 40 minutes. And that's what we did. We, I don't know, I think, Lauren started to take over, and then Belinda Snell started to hit some shots, and just our chemistry was always great with our group. And then we just got in front, and then with about 10 seconds to go, stupid me, like these days, you just, when you're in front, game's over, you just hold it at halfway line, right?
Yeah.
Me. Back in those days, decided to go to the basket, drive to the basket, missed it, and then tried to do a tip back just to put it back in, and come down and rolled on somebody's ankle, and it was a really bad ankle injury.
Was this in the semi?
This is in the semi, and but we had a day between the semi and the gold medal game, and
you would have had half of Brazil wanting to come after you too for shooting at the end.
And so my foot was black all the way up my leg and down my foot, but thank God our physio at the time, Amanda Bernston, put me on a routine. So I had to ice every 2 hours for 24 hours. And in that 2 hours, I had to be in the ice bucket for 20 minutes. And I had this routine that I had to do. And the next day I could walk. And then in the gold medal game, I remember yelling at my doctor at halftime, get me the drugs. I need some more drugs to get me through. But actually played all right. So it was, and then I remember, so the girls stayed after our semi-final when we beat Brazil, because Russia and USA were playing each other in the semi-final in the other crossover. And so the girls stayed, and I went back on the bus and started treatment straight away on my ankle with Amanda. And then I think some of them came home at halftime, and we're all on the same floor, and we're screaming at the TV because Russia were beating USA actually by 20 at one stage, I think it was. And then in the second half, USA started to come back, and it was getting closer and closer, and we're screaming at the TV, cheering for Russia. And because we wanted USA not to win. But lucky enough that Russia beat USA. And it's funny, a lot of people turn around and go, but you didn't play USA. I'm like, yeah, but it's not the thing, like not the point. Like Russia beat USA and we beat Russia. So
that's right. You play who's in front of you.
Yeah, exactly. And but to win that gold medal was one of the biggest moments of my career. And I think the biggest thing was that once again, like I said, the belief that we had within our group, the chemistry that we had was amazing. And I think when you win championships, a lot of people will look back and go, it's probably because of the chemistry that we had. And I say that about Bendigo as well, it was the chemistry that we had. But to win that was just incredible to do it with the players that I did it with, because it was just a really enjoyable group that we had, and it was a really enjoyable tournament.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing all of that. Again, you're just so open with your stories and those sort of things. But I guess sort of that's the challenge now, well, in all sports for every coach, is when you have those teams, how do you bottle that? How do you recreate it with the next team? How do you because obviously teams are full of different personalities, and we won't really go into the whole Liz Cambage era and those sort of things, but you've got players that you're not going to be able to necessarily enforce the same thing when you've got 10 other personalities in there. So I think I think for coaches going back and studying or just asking people like yourself, almost as a mentor, like, what was it about that team, that made them successful? And then in terms of the recruiting side of things as well, like Brett Maher was on the podcast and said, I think more needs to be done still into when you recruit, for instance, imports, into finding out what they are as people. Because he said, we won 3 out of 4 championships. And then he goes, we had, I think it was Julius Hodge, he named at the time, come in, and he goes, he was just doing his own thing and it just killed the team, and he goes, we went from this super gelled high chemistry team, and he goes, that's why, yes, he scored a lot, was a MVP of some league in Europe or something, but just the type of person he was just killed the team. And he said it happened again with Craig Randall the second, I think, with CJ last year, and he was quite open, and he said those kind of things can kill a team. So yeah, I think it's to anyone listening on the podcast, because that we have that are coaches, because we have quite a lot. I think more time needs to be spent, just learning from people like yourself about what makes a good team and leadership and those sort of things. I mean, a lot of people will go to, we've got one down here tomorrow night, Brian Gorgon at Knox Stadium, teaching the X's and O's and all that sort of stuff, which is really great. But then also what makes a great team.
And I think the biggest thing that, like, with our Australian team, like when I name off the players that we had, that was my core group that I went through, was, there was me, there was Belinda Snell, Susie Batkovic, Penny Taylor, Lauren Jackson. Like, so they were mostly our starters, right? So, and then if Susie wasn't at a World Cup, it'd be Jenny Whittle in there, So, and I think the biggest thing is that when I name off those people, a lot of people go, well, that's amazing players that Australia have had. No, I'm so lucky that I went through, and I'm so honored and privileged that I did go through with that group, because it was amazing. But I think the biggest thing was that when you look at Penny and you look at Lauren and you look at Susie, like, we were world-class players. We weren't just, WNBL players. We were world-class players. Like, we've played all around the world. And the biggest thing was, and I will never forget people that came off our bench either. Like, there were so many players like Jenny Screen, Laura Summerton, now Hodges, Tully Bevilacqua, Emily McInerney, Holly Grimer, Emma Randall. I could go on and on and on about the people that I had in my core at my core time. But the biggest thing is that everybody played their role perfectly, and everybody knew who our starters were and who knew was coming off the bench. And they knew the bench players played their role great as well. But people, like, when I talk about Lauren and Penny, 2 of the best players Australia's ever produced, I think, that they did it within the system. They were never selfish. They were never selfish on the floor. Don't get me wrong. There might have been times where we might have had, you're always going to have problems in a team, but no matter what, we all did it within the system. We were all on the same page. I mean, I don't know if it was my leadership that helped that, because I was pretty driven on the way the team was run and who I knew which players to run for which person at which time. I tried to balance everybody within that group and tried to keep everybody happy too. Like, I was that coach on the court, and it doesn't, like, when I talk about Lauren and Penny, like, never had any problems with them on the floor. Never.
Yeah.
Never. Like, it was, they all did it because we're all on the same page.
Yeah, and I guess that's again, that's sort of what we all strive for. I guess I did have a question for later on the podcast, but we're kind of touching on it now, so I'll bring it up now. Is because I can remember, you back in those Tigers days, like, if you drain, I don't know, say 2 threes in a row or something, it didn't matter whether it was the first 3, the second 3, the third 3, like, you're slapping your thighs and going, you've got 12, you've got this, I'm on the ball, like that. I mean, the players are running down now, tapping their head with it after they hit a 3 and, all that sort of stuff. I guess the question I was leading into with that is, when you're as competitive as you are and you're as focused as you are and you just next play, I guess, how do you approach a teammate, for those that might be listening that are on NBL 1 teams or something like that these days is sort of just doesn't have that innate focus and drive and does want to, showboat or
Yeah.
because that's just who they are, and that's the way with social media and stuff. How did you approach that, if you ever had to? I mean, you don't have to name names or anything, but yeah.
Look, it took me a long time to get to that, though. Like, I remember back in the 90s, like, I missed out on the 96 Olympic team, and I reckon a lot of that had to do with my immaturity in a way. Like, I was a bit of a sulker. Like, I would crack the shits, and I'd blame the referees, I'd blame a player, I'd blame whoever I could, because things weren't going the way I wanted them to go. And I think the biggest thing through my whole career, I had to work hard to get where I wanted to get to. I wasn't natural. But the thing is that one of my pet hates, even to the day I retired, is that people didn't work hard. If people weren't following me or being on the same page as me, I'd get on them straight away. I was like that.
Yeah. So you nip it in the bud early.
Yeah, straight away. And I think I was always like, sometimes you forget about your younger years and what you used to do, and sometimes I have to ask Dad, what was I like? And like, now I'm trying to teach the point guards that I've got, like Kristi Wallace or Maddie Rocci, whoever I had in the Australian team, and you're trying to teach them, and you're like, sometimes I forget what I was like when I was a kid, or I forget like some of those early days of Melbourne Tigers. And Dad used to say, no, you were vocal straight away. And I was, and it was, Tom Maher, back in 2000, we had 7 themes that we lived by every day with the Opals. And the biggest one for me, there was a couple, but the biggest one for me was focus on the moment. And I had to really learn. Tom taught me a lot how to think like a point guard. Like, if the shot clock's at this, go with this, or then you go, or, he did help me think really like a point guard. But that focus on the moment theme was big for me, because I was the type of player where you make a mistake, I'd probably dwell on it for another 3 plays.
Right.
Where that focus on the moment thing was, and the biggest thing I say to players now, I preach it now, is like, everybody makes a mistake in a game. It's how quick you can turn yourself around to now focus on the next thing. And I think over time I got really good at that. I think that comes with maturity as well. Playing overseas probably helped me with that as well, because you're by yourself when you play overseas. You're living by yourself. You've got to learn how to have patience over there, and it's not an easy world to live in. But I think that helped me really grow up as a person, as a player. But I think it's now me, even with the Asia Cup, with the point guards at the Asia Cup, it's trying to teach them to be vocal. And the biggest thing I was always thinking, I was thinking like a coach on a court. When I'd play with a coach that would want to call every play down the floor, that's when I struggled the most, because it was like my head wasn't in the game. It was like I wasn't thinking, and it was like they wouldn't let me think. And I felt like I always had the IQ to be able to think of a play at the right time, or think of what to do at this moment. And I got better as I got older, of course, but it was a big thing for me to be able to be vocal and direct and think of everybody else and not just me. That's the difference now. I think the difference is everybody's thinking about themselves, how they get their points, how they get on social media, how they how they can be top of the stats, whatever it is, where I was always thinking about how to make the team better, because it was always about winning for me.
Yeah, no, fantastic. And that's not just a basketball skill, that's a life skill, to be able to stop focusing on the negatives, which we all do in all facets of life, a lot of people, and the ability to get on with the next one. And I think that's what, we see it all the time. It's not just my opinion. What separates the great leaders, is, whether it's a player like you on the court, or it's someone like Gillon McLachlan leading the AFL and something goes wrong. He can't dwell on that. He's got 20 different hats he's got to wear. What's next? What do we got to do right at this moment? So great point that you bring up there. And just to cover off, sort of mindfulness and mindset and the year we're talking about, 2006. I usually frame this in terms of retirement with players, but that have been on the podcast. But with you, I'm going to frame it in terms of the after of the world championship win. And the question is, how do you mentally deal with that? Because whilst lows are hard to deal with, highs can be really hard to deal with as well, because there's this down that comes after it. For me, it was, when I did an Ironman, that was a big goal I'd had for a long time. I did it, and then it's like, what's next? For the players I interview, it's all of a sudden career ends. I'm just normal civilian life, for lack of a better word. No structure. I don't have to be at training at 10 a.m. and then weights at 12 and then massage at 3. I don't have someone wanting me to be somewhere. In this context, though, you've potentially had the highlight of your life outside of maybe having your kids, and you're only, 30 years old or something. You've got another 50 years to live. How do you comprehend that in your head, that life might not get better than that moment I just experienced?
It's
sorry,
funny.
it's a bit heavy, but
no, it's funny because when we won that world championships, we went out and celebrated, and I had my foot in an ice bucket because I was actually getting married 6 days later. So
wow, you're full of stories.
So I was actually so I really only had a week, and I was then going back to France to play. So I pushed it out a couple of more days because I said my ankle injury and all that sort of stuff. And my ankle injury was a true story. But pretty much, I think we got delayed in Chile, wherever we were coming through. So instead of getting home on a Monday night, we got home on a Tuesday morning. I was getting married on the Friday, and then I was flying out to France on a Monday. So, so it was pretty full on that week that I was home. But I think I think for me, it was hard, in those moments, because as soon as you hit the airport in Australia, media was there, and then all of a sudden you go off and you move on. But like I said, I had something else then to focus on.
To do, yeah.
And something you asked me that question again down the track when I had to retire, you'd probably get a different answer. But because I still had something else to focus on, and even when I went to France, all the girls were congratulating me. So it was still there for a while. But then when we got into the French league, it was it's hard to come down from something like that. And actually, to be honest with you, now that I remember talking about it, that I think my first month in France was not good. I think I really struggled
in terms of form and stuff.
If it wasn't a month, it was 6 weeks. And it was because I was going back to the same club that I'd been with the year before. And I knew that year before we'd actually made Final Four of EuroLeague. I ended up being All-Star 5 of the EuroLeague in that Final Four. And so I finished on a high in Europe, and then finish on a high with Australia, and then come back to France in that same club. And my first 4 to 6 weeks was not at my standard, and really struggled. And I think it was more mentally I was struggling. I think that's what it was. And I think the coach actually had to talk to me and go, it's time for you to switch over now and find that groove again, and try and get back to the level that you're at. And I think, and at the time, I think it had a lot to do with me winning gold, to then I didn't have the time to come down, have a bit of time for life, then to go back. It was just, straight back into it. So I struggled a bit those 4 to 6 weeks in France.
No, I appreciate you being vulnerable and letting us know that. I think, I mean, you'd only be human and that's why I ask these questions, how you deal with these things, because there's going to be other people listening to the podcast, and it may not be basketball, but how they deal with, with those sort of things. And I guess that's another way to do it. Whilst you did have the low going into France, is making sure you've got other stuff to go on to. And then secondly, we had Michelle Brogan's brother Dean on the podcast the other day. And it's funny, I mentioned that to him. I'm like, you're Michelle's brother, right? You're not, Michelle's not your brother, because you're on a basketball podcast. But his theory was staying connected. So he's like, when you finish your career, go work in the front office for the year after. In your situation, I guess it would be, have reunions with the girls when you won the championship, keep in touch with them, all those sort of things, which I'm sure you probably do. But it's interesting how different people deal with it. We'll keep moving on because I'm cognizant of your time. We've got then 2008. We'll get you to. I've got something to bring up here, but we'll get you to name sort of the coach and a player again with the Opals in in '08?
Yeah, 2008. And I'm going to name my roommate Holly Grimer.
Yep.
She was
And the
my
coach
roommate.
was?
Yeah, Jan Sterling again.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, now there's a little clip, and I'll put it in the show notes that uh, people might like to go back and look on. And it's an interview straight after. You might know what I'm talking about. An interview straight after the we a pretty horrendous game for the Opals,
Yeah.
final game there. But it's actually a positive that I think people should go back and look at is sort of on how to handle yourself and how to be professional. And this is probably more one for the players that I see, whether it's liking us on Instagram or viewing us on YouTube, these podcasts, is to go back and look at this interview, because I think it's only like 2 minutes, and it's around, I'll cut to the chase, it's around Lisa Leslie just wheeling out all her gold medals, right? And out onto the dais and sort of, I guess, for lack of a better word, showboating, right? And then being asked to put them back in by officials, and then ripping them back out again once she got the flowers and the medal and those sort of things. And I think the way, like, you've literally, well, I'm assuming only an hour or hours earlier, we had a horrific game, but you've been able to compose yourself, and you could have come in there and been filthy, and maybe you were filthy in the change rooms, I don't know, but for you to come out there and be professional about it, and I think that's what a leader does. So I'll put that on in the show notes, because I think that showed the difference in maturity levels between, in this case, Elisa Leslie and yourself, because there's a time and a place to do that, that sort of thing. So I just thought you handled it really well, because there'd be a lot of athletes that would handle it a lot differently.
Yeah.
Probably more in individual sports, but yeah, that would just not handle it that well. And I just thought that was perfect. So I just want to touch on that. And then on that, you're obviously a teammate with Lisa like a year later.
Yeah.
Are you guys besties now, or you just learned to get along, or?
You know what? I actually really enjoyed being around her. Like it was,
Yeah.
like she was, of course, like, I mean, she's a superstar in USA, and it's a different life
Yeah.
over there than what it is here. And but like I would say things to her if I was on the bench and she'd come off, and I'd say things to her, maybe you got to do this or do that. And she would actually listen to me, where there was another player on the team where anytime I'd say something, there was always like, but this and but that. And I was like,
Right.
oh, okay. So I actually enjoyed playing with her, and I actually enjoyed being around her. And I think maybe, look, I mean, I know Lauren pulled out her piggy
No,
tail
okay, so, yeah.
in 2000, like it was, I mean, just the Americans, I mean, they play with so much confidence anyway. And I suppose you feel like it's a bit of arrogance. But I mean, they probably can be like that. They keep winning gold, you know what I mean? But I mean, we won gold at '06, but it's just not the way we do things,
Yeah.
so, and I think we earn respect by not being like that. But no, I actually enjoyed playing with Lisa, got along really well with her. And yeah, she was one person I actually enjoyed playing with at the Lakers,
Yeah.
at the Sparks.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. Yeah. Thanks for clarifying and clearing that up. But I guess also I think the way you played, you were going to demand respect regardless. Just the when you've got, you see it in any sport. Anyone that plays as hard as you played, and sort of hard on the sleeve, like Leighton Hewitt style in tennis sort of thing, like they're going to respect you, your opponents.
Yeah,
It's when you do the opposite stuff, if I use tennis again, like a Nick Kyrgios or something, right? That's going
yeah,
to be a little bit different, but like, I think that's probably the difference when you've got a great player like Lisa Leslie, and, they see how hard of a player you are on the other end of the court.
yeah.
It's the same with, like, I look at if we go modern day, not to age you too much, but we look at like a Sammy Whitcomb,
Yeah,
right? Like, she's going to ruffle some feathers because she plays hard,
yeah,
right? But everyone is going to respect her play, right?
exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
yeah, so I think that's an important thing to go on to now. We're nearly 50 minutes in, and we finally reached the 2012 Olympics. So this is how big your career is. We go bronze. How was that Olympics for you? Any sort of remarks you want to make on that one? Obviously, the coach and a player as well.
Yeah, so coach was Carrie Graff, and a player I'll go with is I don't think I've mentioned Belinda Snell yet, have I? I'll go with Belinda
No,
Snell.
not as a player in that regard. Yeah.
Belinda Snell. So she was my roommate that tournament. I look, 2012 was a lot different. It was we didn't medal in 2010 at the World Championships. So for me, a lot of people probably don't know, but I went to four World Championships, 4 Olympics, and 1 Junior World Championships, and medaled at every one except 2010. So, like I said, pretty lucky to go through with a group that I went through, and so to not medal in 2010 was really unfamiliar territory for a lot of us. For the new girls, probably not so much because they hadn't medaled yet. But, for the likes of Lauren, myself, Penny, Snelly, like we'd medaled nearly every time we'd put on the green and gold. So, and then, not to medal in 2010. Then in 2012, we a little bit worried because we lost to France in the regular games by 2 in overtime. And once again, unfamiliar territory because every Olympic Games that I'd been to, we didn't lose until it was the gold medal game.
Yeah.
So we knew that losing that game, we had a bit of a crisis meeting with Johnny Els was our athlete liaison officer. So we met with him being captain of the Rugby Union of Australia and just got the group together and talked about how do we handle this situation, because now we knew that we'd probably have to cross over in the semi against USA. We didn't have Penny Taylor that tournament. She blew out her ACL in April that year, so we didn't have her for that tournament. So it was really, really difficult for us. And, I remember one of the players in that meeting, one of the young kids, I won't name a person, but they turned around and said, we just got to be happy that we come to work every day and we can be in this situation. I'm like, no. That's not how it works with the Opals. We need to medal. That's the way we do things, like I didn't say that, but that was what I thought. I'm just like, you kidding me, right? It was like, we have to medal. It's just what we do. And I'm like, well, I'm not walking away from my last Olympics without a medal. I'll do everything possibly that I can. And it was really tough because a lot of us, some of us oldies were going through with injuries. Like I had Achilles problems. So I was like sort of leading all the way up to the Olympics. I was 1 day on, 1 day off. And Lauren had a high hamstring that nobody could find what was wrong with her until December that year after the Olympics. She went to a different doctor and they found that I think it was a high hamstring and had to have surgery on it, and like couldn't even sit on her bum, and was taking painkillers through the Olympics, but nobody knew what it was, like it was. And then Susie Bakovic had a back injury. So a lot of us oldies were going through with injuries. And so it was a bit of like we were there, but we weren't always on court, like it was difficult. But I think in the last game, our bronze medal game, we lost to USA by 12. We actually played really well in the first half. They went to a zone in the second and we struggled a bit. And then we go and play Russia in the bronze medal game. And like it was just probably one of the best games I'd ever played for Australia, to be honest with you. And like there was moments during those last couple of days before that bronze medal game, and I'd have my headphones in going to the games, and like I'd listen to a song and I'd think about, this is my last Olympics, and tears would come to my eyes, and I ended up going to sit down the back of the bus, like just so people couldn't see me. And like I knew that like I'm getting emotional now, but I knew that it was my last. So I think I was going to do everything that I possibly could to win a medal, to walk away with being an athlete that that had been to 4 Olympics and won 4 medals. And I wanted that. I wanted it bad. And I think Carrie Graff just let me me and Lauren play in that last game. And
yeah, why wouldn't you?
You know what I mean? Like a little bit, and didn't sub us much, and just let us play. And it was probably the best game I'd ever played for Australia.
Yeah. Fantastic. We'll put that in the show notes as well. We can link back to that, so we can go back and watch that. And thanks for sharing that side of things again. I guess I've got a whole bunch of questions here on it, but while we're sort of wrapping up the Olympic side of things, I guess in the future, with all your experience in the Olympics, is something like obviously people will go, would you coach the Opals? Obviously, but something like a chef de mission role, would that be something you'd look at in the future if it came up?
Don't know, like I don't think so. Like I think that's a self-confidence thing. Like it's funny when I'm on the floor, I'm a completely different person to what I am off the floor. Do you know what I mean? Like
Right.
it's like when I'm on the floor, because I'm so confident in what I have put into me as an athlete, like how hard I worked, how much I studied the game, how much I felt like my IQ was, above everybody else's. That was my confidence. That was the zone I could be in. But when I'm off the floor, it's funny. Like I feel like I don't carry myself that way. I don't carry myself with that confidence. And like a lot of people are like, well, you'll be a great coach. I'm like, yeah, but I need to do my time first. I need to be an assistant coach first, get the confidence in that before I go into a head coaching role. And it's all a self-confidence thing for me to be able to do that. And but the X's and O's I have no problems with whatsoever. But
Yeah.
if you want to talk to me about basketball and all that sort of things, it just rolls off the tongue, But even when people say, can you come and do a speech for me? I'm like, no, I won't do a speech. But if you want to ask me question and answers, no problems.
Yeah.
It's that sort of things that I enjoy and I feel comfortable doing. And so I'm not sure. Like I've never been asked, but I loved being a part of the Asia Cup, being a part of the coaching staff and being a mentor and giving back to the experience to the girls that are coming through. I actually really enjoyed that.
Great.
Especially to the point guards. I really enjoyed it. Like Maddie Rocci would meet with me every day and we would chat about, what it takes to be a great point guard at this level. And, I just always give her my experiences and how I dealt with things and what I did. And, she really
That's
took me
amazing.
in.
Yeah.
I really enjoy that side of things.
That's awesome. Well, we hope you never get sick of it because that's exactly you know I don't want to bring it back to the podcast, but that's exactly when I say this is a platform for players to give back. I think some people go, "Oh, well, they don't really owe the fans anything." I'm like, no, that's not the way I mean it. The way I mean it is they've got all this knowledge, all this experience. Like, what a shame it would be for them to go off and live, just a quiet life and not share all of that experience
Yeah.
because they could easily just by having a chat with Maddie, fix an issue
Yeah.
that's been going on in her head for months, years, who knows how long.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
that's the giving back. So that's so great that you love doing that because with your experience, there'll be a mentor role, a coaching role, a assistant coaching role for you, sort of anywhere. So that does sort of lead on to as you mentioned with your Achilles and those sort of things. You knew retirement was sort of around the corner. And a lot of the other players I asked sort of how much thought had they put into retirement. For you, it might be a little bit different. You might have thought of family sort of stuff. They were sort of thinking like, what am I going to do to earn money sort of thing.
Yeah.
Had you put much thought into that in those last couple of years?
No, not at all. I think everyone thought I was gonna everyone knew that in 2012 that was my last Olympics, and I think they just assumed that then I was going to retire. But then again, I went home and played with Bendigo for a season, and we won a championship. So then I had to stick around for another one and try and win another one, and we did. And then even the third year, I think the only way that I was ever going to retire from the game is one through injury or two being pregnant, and in the end, I was pregnant. The third year we went into the grand final, I fell pregnant. And I think I retired. I was 2 months off 40 years old and I was 16 weeks pregnant when I retired. So it's that was the only way that I was ever going to walk away from the game. Like, don't get me wrong, I think even the last 2 years when Bendigo won their championships after the 2012 Olympics, like it was still hard to walk away because we had such a great group that got along so well. And then when you win a championship, you want to do it again. And we had that first year we won the championship, we had the same starting five in the next year. So our team hadn't, like our bench had changed a little bit, but our starters were still the same. So and I loved playing, absolutely loved playing. Like, don't get me wrong, training got a little bit harder. But I was lucky enough that with Dad as coach, I still did every session. Unless my Achilles were really bad, I'd have to stop. Like, because I always felt that if I didn't train, I'd be letting somebody down, or I needed to train to have the confidence going into that weekend, and things like that. But I think Dad scrimmaged a lot in his trainings, so that made a big difference. Like, if I was with a coach that did a lot of drills, I'd be like, oh, I'm done, but Dad would do, he would do shooting at the start, then he'd do drills that we needed to work on leading into that game, or what we didn't do well the week before. And then the last hour was a lot of scrimmage. So, and the girls loved it. I loved it. And I think that's what kept me going in the end. And and then falling pregnant in my last season, played half of the season and then retired. So, yeah. But I think the biggest thing then, it was just family. For me, it was focusing on family. And then I had my business, and I had that for 8 years. And so I had plans already going through to my next. And you know what? Having my business actually took me away from the game, because me living in Melbourne, my businesses were in Bendigo. So that meant I drove every weekend to work in the businesses. And so it took me away from the game that I'd been around for my whole life. And and sold it in September last year, and then went straight into Melbourne Boomers. So it's my life hasn't really stopped, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've only got to know you the last hour, but you don't seem like someone that would just sit down easily and not do a whole lot of stuff. So it makes sense. And that's really great that you're able to keep that team together, because it doesn't happen that much these days. I mean, you look at the upcoming WNBL season, I feel like they've just put every player in a hat, just throwing it up in the air, and then you've got like all the players changing across teams. I don't even know if the Flyers are getting together a team at the moment. They haven't announced much. And then Sydney are putting together a stacked team, and it's just but it makes for an interesting season. So
it does.
So that'll be good. I won't keep you too much longer. I did want to ask a couple of sort of out there questions. One is, there's a lot of 3x3 now. I don't, unless I'm mistaken, you didn't get the chance to play 3x3. But would you have liked to have played it?
No. Not. Don't get me wrong, I haven't watched a lot of it, but I did watch the girls when they had to try and qualify for, I think it was when Alice, Beck Cole, and
Alice just
Maddie
missed
Garrick
that shot at the end.
When Maddie Garrick were there, and they were trying to, I think it was through the COVID time, and they were trying to qualify for the Tokyo Olympics, and they missed out. I watched a little bit of it then, and I thought, this is not bad. But I think when I played, it was a lot of structure. It wasn't a lot of this dribble handoff, pick and roll stuff now that I'm not a big fan of. Don't get me wrong, I loved pick and roll. Like, I thought
I was going to say pick and roll was like one of your things.
I know. I think but it was more like you'd run structure first and then go into that, or you'd go a high pick and roll, like low shot clock or something like that. Like, it was, I liked movement where you knew when somebody was going to be open, or when they were coming off a screen, you knew they were open, or who were trying to get the ball to. Like, I loved that sort of stuff, where now it's like, let's just everybody run, like juniors run pick and roll, dribble handoff. It's like, what do you ever get off a dribble handoff? Like, what do you, like, other than maybe a shot behind the dribble, like, the 3-point line, like there's not a lot you can, unless you blast off it and get to the hoop. But
it's more player dependent.
When is that ever going to happen? But anyway, but I don't know. I just not sure if I ever would have played 3-on-3. I love the team game. I love the 5-on-5, and but I tell you, I think it's made some of the players a lot stronger by playing that 3-on-3. Like, Beck Cole, Maddie Garrick, Alice, they can all take bumps and finish now, and because they get fouled, and it's that's stuff that Tom used to teach us back in our training sessions.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, we had Lucas Walker on, who's played in the men's side of things, and he said, just like those players you've listed off, it's the 3-on-3 is suited to a particular type of player. Yeah. And he was saying, like, he reckons the dream player for the men's side of things would be like a Mitch Creek, right? Yeah. To go in there, physical player that can shoot the three and just make up stuff as it goes along.
Wally would be good at it. Kristi Wallace would be good at it, I reckon.
Yeah, okay. Selectors, if you're listening.
Tough as nails.
yeah, absolutely. And a Jet, transition. On that, I'll proceed with the B part of the question anyway, even though you're not really a fan of the 3-on-3. If for some reason there was a gun to your head and you had to play 3-on-3, we'll get you to pick 3 other players. So you've got a sub that you played with at any time in your career that you would want on your team to play 3x3.
Oh God, that is so hard. I'd go with Susie Bakovic for sure.
Right.
Can flat out score. Belinda Snell as a shooter. Oh God, now I've got to pick out a Penny or Lauren. That makes it hard. Can I pick 4? I'd probably go with those 2, but yeah, they're maybe Penny because she can get to the hoop. She was tough at getting to the hoop and getting hit and making the and one. She was one of the best players in Australia to do it. So I'd probably, there you go. There's a shooter, a post player that can flat out score, and somebody that can get to the rim or shoot the 3. But Lauren would be my sub for sure.
Okay. I've written those down because what's going to happen one day is there's going to be a WNBA 2K23 and you're going to be able to simulate those players in and actually see how you all went. So we'll play that out for real and simulate it at some point. Now, I guess you've kind of already answered the next question was in a sense of, I guess some people would wonder, because you're world-class, you've played everywhere, you've got an incredible knowledge, you could coach anywhere, and we see that with like Maddie Nielsen going to the NBA, Adam Capehorn, all these guys going overseas, and we've got this lamp of knowledge, this genie in a lamp in Keilor. Why be in Keilor and why not WNBA? And I say you've sort of answered this question yet because you don't sort of feel ready, I guess, yet, and you've got the kids and those sort of things. But is that sort of something you look at in the future when the kids are, 19, 20, and, is that something you aspire to do, is go to the top level again?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's, like I said, I want to do my time here in Australia first and learn from so many different people, like it's, I had my dad as a coach for such a long time. And, a lot of players have a sports psychologist through their career. I never had one. Dad was like my sports psychologist in a way. But I think, I think once, like, it's like, as you know, it's like very difficult right now with my kids being so young. And I traveled so much in my life where I feel like right now I don't want to travel. Like I'd rather just be here in Melbourne and do what I have to do here first in Melbourne and get the experience. And then, and you never know what will happen. Like an offer could come in and you can't refuse it. Do you know what I mean? Like it's things like that once it's in front of you, you'll never know. But it's right now I'm comfortable sitting where I'm sitting and finally being back involved with basketball after being out of it for 8 years and enjoying my time with the Boomers, Melbourne Boomers and a part of the Australian team. I'm enjoying that and learning and just learning. Like I said, I understand all the X's and O's and what we should do in these situations, but when you're that head coach, there's so much pressure, like as a player, I had control of what was on the court. I could control things, like it was easy for me to make changes or, let's just trap one time and see what happens, or on the ball and, things. I could make those changes and the coaches gave me the confidence to do that. And, but as a coach, you can't do it because you're standing on the sideline. If things aren't going well, you can't call a timeout every minute, but there has to be so much preparation time. That's the biggest thing, is doing it all at training. You have it all set in stone at training that when it becomes game time, it should just, and I think that's the biggest thing I'll give my dad. When I was with him in my later years with Bendigo, when we would scrimmage, we'd make sure there was a point guard in each team, of course, but he would let us run our timeouts during our scrimmages. So then we can make adjustments and he would give us the freedom to do that. So when we get to a game, we'd be like, remember how we ran this play on Tuesday night at training or whatever, and it worked. Let's do that again in the game. Like it'd be things like that, the freedom to have that. But I suppose it made the point guards grow in that point guard position of being that coach on the floor. Like Kelly Wilson was with us for such a long time. She was like, I probably mentored her, not knowing that I did, where now she's a true point guard. She's a steady point guard. She understands the game. She makes the right pass at the right time, things like that. And I think you need that's where I think we're lacking a little bit with women's basketball. Or I don't know if it's the same all over the world, but especially here in Australia, where a lot of our point guards are now two men trying to be a one man, where I was the one man growing up all the way through,
Right, interesting, yeah.
So now we're trying to teach our scoring. Look, I think all point guards should be scoring point guards because I think that what makes you tough. But we're trying to teach these two men to try and think like what a one man should think like. And like I said, what play to run for what person at what time, understanding tempo, control tempo, be that dictator on the floor, all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I think I think when I feel like my time is right is when I probably maybe look for a bit more in the coaching role. But right now I'm happy being an assistant coach and doing my time.
Yeah, awesome. And that's fair enough. And I don't think we want to let you go either, because it's that I feel like, well, I felt like this for a while, like the WNBL is like ready to burst. Like in the next couple of years, I think the only thing is holding it back is some governance issues, between owners and league and stuff like that, right? Because talent is not the issue.
Yeah.
The product is not the issue. So for people that say, oh, people don't come and watch women's sport and stuff, blah blah blah, like that argument once probably held some sway in different sports. In our sport, it doesn't, because people want to come watch it. The product itself, like I went and watched a game, Southside Flyers versus Bendigo last season.
Yeah.
And like they shot, I think it was 23 out, like it was a one-off game, but it was like 23 3-pointers out of 35 or something. It was like nearly 70% 3-point rate. Like that doesn't happen in the NBA. Like it was phenomenal. Like they scored 118 points. And this was when Bendigo were on like a 9-1 streak to start the season. They started really hot last season, Bendigo. And you've got players, which outside of yourself, I can't remember too many players until nowadays that were shooting from where in the shooting contest they got like a 4-point spot.
Yeah.
That will stretch. But if you got a player like that, they're going to stretch the floor, and everyone else is better for it. Like the spectacle of women's basketball is right there. So I think it's exciting if we can have people like yourself still developing the talent and those sort of things. The sky's the limit. Like even on social media, like things are going viral in the women's game instead of the men's game. Like I don't know how many times I've watched Sabrina Ionescu hit 37 points in the 3-point contest now. Like it's everywhere. Like it's blowing up. Hoop City that have got a lot of the facilities around here. Like they show some men's stuff, but there was like a month there where Beck Allen was in town and everything was around Beck Allen training there, and Chris Anstey came down to help her and blah blah blah. Like it's so close to like just blowing up if you get the right I'll get off my soapbox soon, but if you get the get someone, whether it's a Larry Kesselman or someone else, someone that's really invested in getting that out there. Like it's so close, it's not funny. So I really appreciate on that note, I'll sort of wrap it up, but just from all of the stories and the openness you've had today, and I don't know how the hell you did 8 years not involved in basketball, because I think you're the person I've met that loves basketball the most. Like you just talk about it so passionately, you played passionately. I can't see that you'd ever I can see why you said that you would only retire for either pregnancy or injury.
Yeah.
Because like you just love the game. And so I think the more that we can get you I know you're not confident, you said doing speeches and stuff, but just getting out there, whether it's on a podcast like this or it's, maybe a private mentor role with the like Players Association or something, when a player's going through a funk or something,
Yeah.
like getting you in touch with them. And I do have I'll let the cat out of the bag now. I do have Jacob Holmes coming on in a couple of weeks. So that's something I'll probably put to him if it's not already, because we hear a lot of positive stuff about what they're doing.
Yeah.
And Annalee Maley, I think, just had David Stiff on her podcast about he's more in charge of the psychology side of things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's just having someone like yourself, having players from sort of yesteryear, for lack of a better term, like this thing's just going to blow. And for anyone that says it's not going to go off, like I think in 2 years, I'll come back on and rant again and say I told you so, because I feel like it's really on the edge.
It is, and I think the biggest thing is that women's sport is such a, not even just basketball, it's big out there at the moment. You know what I mean? Everyone's like, you know, you look at the soccer and everything's on social media, like 80,000 fans, 75,000 fans, you know, like same with netball when they had their grand final, same thing. And I think basketball needs to try and get to that level. And where we can pack out I know the Melbourne Boomers do really well and the Flyers do really well. They get massive crowds and I don't know if that's just Victorian basketball because it's such a big following, but I think I know Melbourne Boomers do an unbelievable social media page. Like they're just always putting things out on social media, and they're very they're next level. That's the best I've ever seen in the WNBL. And look, you know, back in our day, we didn't even have social media. Like it just wasn't around. You know, and it's so different these days. But I think the biggest thing is that as much as we want our athletes to have everything that they possibly can, we don't want them to like for example, when I played in Russia, what happened was when I was in Russia, and this is why I think not so much now, but I think Russia are no longer a powerhouse of women's basketball, is because what happened was in Russia when we played in the local league of Russia, like when we played our Russian games and not Euro League, they had a rule where you had to have 3 Russians on the court at all times. Right. So because our Russian club and Spartak was the other club that Lauren played with, and Sue Bird and Diana Taurasi. So what happens is that you have these 2 clubs that had massive money that brought in whatever imports they could bring in, even if it was European type imports, because they're not imports anyway, European players. That what happened is the Russians become so valuable that they stopped working. They stopped working because they knew they were going to get the money because they needed the Russians in the Russian league to play. Right. So, and this is what I believe, and this is why I reckon is the Russians are no longer a powerhouse of women's basketball because of that reason. Because they were getting their money anyway. They didn't have to work hard to get the money because they were valuable. And we just don't want players to, as much as what we want them to have everything, because we never really had anything back in our day, we don't want them to become too greedy that they don't work hard in their game anymore because they're getting everything anyway. So, and that's my biggest advice. Like that's the biggest thing that I've seen from when I was around to what it is now. And they get so much through sponsorship, or the money is so much better in the WNBL now than when I was around. Like my first season out of the Institute, I was on $3,000. You know, it's crazy now, and like fantastic that it is this way. But we still want the players to work hard and still have that determination to be the best that they possibly can. Like I know the players that I went through, they wanted to be the best in the world, not just in Australia, not just make the Australian team and be comfortable. They wanted to be the best in the world. And like I said, and that's why I was so lucky to go through who I went through with.
Yeah. No, you make a really good point there. And I think part of that is making sure we've got from the very junior level, the bases, make it real competitive from there, you know, like really hard to make the gems, really hard to make the sapphires, you know, really hard to make those teams. And so that we can keep that, that competitiveness going, you know, and then, you know, obviously down the road, looking at, you know, whether it's something like a Next Stars program that they've got in the NBL or something like that, you know, something that's just going to push the competitiveness level. Because it's just I think at least we're probably looking at a bit more stability in the WNBL, I think now.
Yeah.
You know, like Yeah, I remember when it was kind of similar to the NBL, went through a phase where, a team would get a license for 2 years and then it'd get taken off because it went broke. And then, and we sort of had it, with the WNBL to a certain extent. I even remember I had a funny story written down. I think it was back when the Christchurch Sirens were in the WNBL. Yeah, because I actually at the time I worked at the Dandenong Rangers in the front office, and I got Caitlin Ryan told me a funny story. They'd just come back from a road trip, and I won't throw this player under the bus, but no, I will. So first name starts with K, surname McLeod, and they get to the airport to fly to Christchurch, and she's left behind, and they go back to get her, and they go, "Where are you? Well, what's the hold up?" And they're like, "She wants my passport." The customs official. I said, "Well, just give her your passport then." She goes, "Well, I don't have it." She goes, "Well, why not? We're going over there." She goes, "Yeah, but we're playing the Australian League, not the New Zealand League." She goes, "Yeah, but we're still going to New Zealand." And so she hadn't bought her passport because she couldn't comprehend that that even though they're playing the Australian League, you're still going to New Zealand. So they had to get. Luckily, they had time, and she still went back and got her passport. And I cut Kathleen some slack though, because she was a good high IQ player on the court.
She was
in that regard. But yeah,
just had knee problems.
yeah, exactly. But that seems to happen. But look, thanks so much for your time today. I couldn't have gone any better in terms of your generosity, and we'll put it out there, and even if it helps one person or 10 people or 100 people, just by sharing experiences, that's just going to make someone's day better, and with the players as well, even if it hasn't something hasn't super resonated with them, the fact that they can now see how open you might be if they didn't know you personally, to be able to give you a call or message you and say, "Hey, can we just have a chat over a coffee and figure some things out?" Because reality is you've been there, done that, and they might be playing under a coach, whether it's the coach you've got there at the Boomers, Chris Lucas, or it's Guy Malloy, or it's anyone in the league. You can go, "Well, this is the system they use. This is what they're trying to do," and give them a handout with things. Because I think when I'm talking to players, and I'm certainly not a coach at all. I'm just interested. When you brought up before about dribble handoffs and screens and things like that, is you look on the flip side of it. I go down and watch the NBL one a couple of weeks ago, and Andrew Gase is out there, still running the same shuffle offense, that's been around for decades. So it then leads to the point, why do we need dribble handoffs and on-ball screens and all this sort of stuff, although there is an on-ball screening first option? But you know what I mean? Like, even when everyone knows your entire playbook, you can still go out there, and if you execute your side of things, you'll still have plenty of success. So
exactly.
So that side of things. But look, the longest podcast we've done so far, so sorry for taking up so much of your time. But it's been awesome. Thanks so much. You're coaching, I assume you're still assisting for this upcoming season, with the Boomers? Yep. So everyone can get along. And I think that if they haven't named it while we've been talking, they're about to name their second import on the social medias. So jump on that, on the Melbourne Boomers Insta, and follow them, and get along the games, because I went to a fair few of them last season, and they're just awesome. So get along to that, and then when's our next major international tournament? Is it the Olympics next year, or is there something in between?
So actually the Australian team is trying to get some games in China at August, and they're only practice matches. China wants to play us in 5 games, so we don't have a lot of players available at the moment, so we're just seeing what's happening there, and it's still not 100%, but that'll be for 2 weeks in August, start of September, and then we'll go into our WNBL season, and then in February they have the qualification break. So I think it's like 10 days or 2 weeks, and so where the Australian team, I think all the coaches will be back, because Sandy and Gorry and Orloff and all them won't be in the WNBA. So
makes sense.
In February, and that's actually the qualifications for the Olympics. So Yeah. But they reckon it's a little bit easier. I'm not 100% sure, but they reckon that there's 4 teams in 4 pools or something like that. And it's just the top 3 go through. So you just need to, it's only the bottom team that drops out, and that'll be your 12 that'll go into the Olympics.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Yeah. We'll keep track of that. Obviously, if there's anyone listening to this that wants to sort of know what those pools are and all those sort of things, just jump on the FIBA website, all that sort of stuff's usually there. But thanks again. And we might follow up in a couple of years and see where if you've taken the plunge into head coaching or something. We'll see how you're going. All right. Thanks very much, Kristi.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. Take care.
See you. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to like and subscribe on whatever platform you listen to us on. And we look forward to catching you in the next episode.